Persona 5. Dan Tack, you have been like a 2-liter of Coke that's been shaken up. I feel like you're ready to explode.
I really have. Honestly, I think this game is just incredible. Incredible. Just amazing through and through. I'm only 30 hours into it right now. Joe's completed the whole game. He did our review, which I highly recommend you check out on the site. And I could not be more in love with this game. It just does everything so well. Like there's even the minutia is just so well done. It's just like, they didn't have to do that. This battle screen doesn't have to end with this, car making a trip. It's just like everything is so delicately done. It's just like nothing went unnoticed.
It seems like presentation you're in love with,
absolutely.
more than anything else.
I mean, I love everything. But
Okay.
But yeah, the presentation is particularly stylish, like Dan's talking about. Even like menu screens look great. Yeah, like transitions from one menu screen, like this, like saving screen to loading screen or whatever, or even in shops, like, oh, let me check out your inventory. They've all got these like stylish transitions and stuff going on. Like,
fair to say the most stylish game ever made?
Boy, I don't know about
ever made is so. Why do you have to use a term like that?
No joke.
From the clips I've seen, it looks insane.
It's super slick and looks great.
And how's the rest of the game?
Also great.
Because you're like, all I know is incredibly long, over 100 hours, and a lot of talking, and stylish as all hell. That's really my only frame.
So get this. I want to hop in because I hate games. You know that I don't like games that are just heavy on story and you don't get to do any gameplay.
You don't even like talking in the office. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But no, usually that like that'll get my goat if a game's just like, oh my gosh, I have to scroll through all this text to get to the action. But in Persona, it is done so in such a way that I enjoy it a lot. Your social things have an impact on the game, on the gameplay.
Here's what I did. Like, if you don't know what sort of distinguishes Persona as a series, in general, it's about a sort of like modern day setting that is this unique mixture of sort of like everyday like simulation, time management, like you're sort of like, hey, you're a high school student. Yeah, you're a high school student, so you just need to sort of live that, and you need to study for exams and like spend time with your friends. But then there's also this like supernatural element cut in that you need to like, interact with demons and save the world, etc.
So it feels like part simmy in a way, where you're working your way.
Sure, part of it is
so. In my mind, Persona is sort of half like classic traditional turn-based Japanese RPG, and half like visual novel.
Okay. Working your
visual
way through
novel
a calendar year.
/ sim. Yeah, like day by day, you are working your way through. So it's like you start at in early April, and then then you choose what to do with your time after school, and then it cuts to the next day, and it's like, all right, well, now it's the morning. Here's me taking the train to school, and now I'm in class. And now what do I do after class? What do I do in the evening? And okay, so that sounds super boring.
Yeah,
but
it does.
But what makes that so interesting is the activities that you fill that time with are like getting to know your party members. So you like opt to spend time with the characters that like you find interesting, or maybe you just do activities around Tokyo. Like, oh, I'm gonna go to the batting cages. I'm gonna go to a sauna or something.
The Big Burger Challenge.
Do the Big Burger Challenge for sure.
Is this like a Yakuza situation? Like tons of weird side crap? Or
we don't call games crap.
Oh, excuse me. Side junk.
A little bit, but like the important thing to know about it is that like it's not just like stuff you're doing for the sake of like, oh, I'm just going to fill my time. Everything you're doing like feeds into your progression in different ways. So you have what they call like social stats, like your knowledge, your dexterity, and things like that. And the things you do like contribute points towards those things, or they contribute points towards a relationship with a friend. And at different stages in that relationship, you might get like concrete bonuses, and like you can now do this thing in battle, or you have this new ability that you can spend your do with your time. So
I feel like Persona 4 found a wider audience. I think it was a real shining star on the Vita, and that helped it find a bigger audience and whatnot. I still think Persona 5 could rope in a bigger audience. Is there anything they need to know?
Will.
I mean, it's a clean break, right?
I think it is the most accessible title in the series because it has a very long, quote unquote tutorial, basically everything up to and including the first dungeon. So I'd say the first 8 to 10 hours, depending on how you view it, is basically it's got you on a tighter leash. And then it basically says, now you know all the mechanics, go have fun, go crazy.
For 10 hours?
Calling it
I
a
would say so.
tutorial is a little misleading. It doesn't give you the degree of freedom that you later have in the game, but it's
Yes.
not like you're constantly responding to menu prompts that are saying, like, do this,
Oh, yeah,
do
yeah.
this, do this. The thing to know is that, like, so this game is huge and it is complex and it has a lot of interlocking systems. So part of the reason it takes that time is that it, like, slowly introduces them to make sure you're familiar with, like, this is how time management works in general.
Sure.
This is how you interact with your friends. This is this is how dungeon crawling works in general before, like, sort of blowing them out and letting you sort of freely, move between those.
Because
things.
although we pointed out that those elements, are social, virtual, visual novel kind of thing, they are all very serious at the same time. Like that time is very important. How you use it. Like if you want to be a crazy min-maxer, you can be like, well, it's raining today, so I have to do this thing in the morning, and I have a part-time job at night that I absolutely have to do today because it'll give me a social link contract for +1 point because I'm holding this correct persona. There's a lot. Like if you just want to go through it and be like, I want to play with my friends, and after school, or I want to go talk to the girl I like, you could do that. But at the same time, you can be on the other level of like, I want to max every stat and every confidence.
This is
Yeah.
the ultimate
So-
min-maxing society angle that Dan Tack, you are all about.
Yeah,
That is why
totally.
you love this game.
Totally.
I mean, it is really fun, and I did play the game like this actually, where it's like if you can max out like all of your relationships in a single playthrough, but that requires a much more like regimented schedule,
It doesn't seem fun.
which is how I enjoy playing these games.
Oh, okay. I
but
take it back. I'm sorry, sir.
a lot of people don't. So this goes back to your original question, I think, which is like, can you start here? And you do not need to be intimidated by the optimization, by the time management that like Dan and I are talking about, because like this is a way that we enjoy to play the game, but it has these layers of accessibility. If you don't want to play like that, you just want to hang out with one particular character, max one stat, just keep banging your head against that burger challenge. You can keep like
you could do it.
you can do that, and that's okay. And I don't think the game. I mean, I don't think you will be getting. You won't see all of the stories the game has to offer, but you will see the main story and
Yeah.
a lot
And
of
the
the
stories
good
that
side
you
stories.
want to see.
Yeah.
You'll be able
It's
to
self-directed
pull on
in
those
that
threads that you want to go down.
sense. Mhm.
And in addition, I want to say this persona actually has a story difficulty. So
Oh,
if you want
yeah.
to play it on, if you don't want to get mudoed and killed, by a random enemy, which is a point of frustration in SMT and Persona, like instant kill abilities. But if you just want to play the game and enjoy the story, there's a mode for that where you'll basically get like 1 billion gold and XP from every
Yeah.
fight.
It essentially takes out the need to grind, so you don't need, that is part of the time management in Persona. If you're playing on sort of a normal mode, is like, okay, I can go into the dungeon, get this far in the dungeon, last this long before like my magic points are gone, and I just need to like retreat and refuel kind of thing. So, but yeah, if you go on what they call like safe mode, you can basically just
The combat won't be a part of the game.
Yeah,
more or less.
the combat is not as challenging, but you get to like freely interact with the story.
Is the combat fun? I know you've criticized like dungeon design from Persona in the past. Is that all up to par? Better than it's ever been? Where are we at?
It's a big change for Persona in the sense that Persona 3 and 4 were randomly generated dungeons. So they were just sort of like corridors that felt a little stitched together. The dungeons are more deliberately, not more, I mean, they are deliberately designed in Persona 5. So they are the same every time. They have, a set layout that makes them, what's the way to say it? Like, they are more fun to explore because it feels like thought has gone into them.
It's very Kyle Hilliard. Yeah.
But
You love that.
I adore that. I don't like randomized dungeons. I feel like they're like bland and robotic, and I want a human hand to touch those things, and I want to
Yeah, brother.
explore them
Yeah,
that
So
way.
you get the best of both worlds in Persona 5, actually, because not only do you get the carefully curated dungeons, which are super cool, the ones I've done so far, but there's also a place called Mementos, which is basically the random dungeon experience from other Persona games, more or less.
So you get the
It's the
best of
Chalice
one.
dungeons.
Yeah. So you know what I actually want to point out here too?
This is the optional leveling dungeon.
I want to talk a little bit about the story because the premise is really cool too.
Sure.
And that's like, so you're at like previous games, you're sort of a high school student that's a newcomer to this school, newcomer to this area, and you start meeting some people and get wrapped up in what is essentially like a little conspiracy within your school.
Mm-hmm.
And that ends up having tendrils that reach out into this sort of larger thing. And as a part of all this, you and your school friends form a group called the Phantom Thieves. And basically what you can do, you and your friends are able to sort of jump into what they call the metaverse, this sort of like alternate reality in which
Digimon.
It's more like Inception. It's actually really sweet.
Yeah. So you're able to jump into this alternate universe in which, like, particularly not necessarily evil, but people with what they call like corrupted desires. In the metaverse, these desires are sort of made manifest in what they call palaces, and these palaces are what are function as the dungeon. So it's basically what these like sort of evil characters, the ways that they perceive the world and the ways that they see themselves sort of like twisting it to their own benefit are sort of what you are exploring. So part of the fun of the game and like part of the mystery of it is finding out like who owns like who the owners of these palaces are that you're infiltrating, and how the design and sort of concept of these palaces represent their sort of like worldview or perception.
Little psycho-Nazi in a way.
Yeah,
it's
for sure.
It's really well done,
Yeah.
and with it, we don't want to go into any spoilers, but it's super cool to see like how these characters' personalities manifest them, physical manifestations of like.
We can talk about the first one. I don't think that's too much of a spoiler.
Yeah, well, that's probably okay.
I think that's been out there. So like the first dungeon is like there's a gym teacher in your school that essentially sees the school as sort of like the castle that he rules over, and he's free to sort of do what he wants. So in the palace, it's this like medieval castle in which he is the king, and he has the students sort of like doing slave work and stuff like that. So it's all, like that's an example of how that is like interpreted.
Dan, you seem so hot on this game.
I'm super hot on this
Are you
game.
enjoying
like,
it?
I could not be hotter on this game.
Oh, good Lord. All right, let's break it down. Are you hotter on this game than you were 30 hours or so into Persona 4? Do you think it's
Absolutely. I do, but people will say, that's just because it's the new one, and it's been like freaking 8 years since Persona 4.
It's been a long time.
It's been a Catherine since the last one.
I think this has like the best of all the Persona stuff put into one, and I just think I didn't like the thief theme when like they started revealing it with at E3 and all that stuff like years ago or whatever, and I just found out how they twisted that to be amazing in Persona. Like instead of like you're all out attack, it's a hold up situation where you're actually holding up the enemy, like you're pulling off a robbery. Everything is just all the little details. They're just perfect. It's a beautiful thing.
It's super polished, like technically, thematically, it's a lot of fun.
Wow. So strongest JRPG in years? Is that what we're talking here? What's the framework? Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
From
yeah.
Yeah, and I would agree.
Like strongest since what, Dan?
Oh,
Ni no Kuni.
I'd have to see. I mean, like it's weird. I'd have to see a list of.
Yeah,
like,
I need
like,
to. I can't say it offhand.
But
Joe, you gave it a 9.25.
yes.
Sounds great. Why not a 10? What's holding this game back?
Well, it's hard to like focus on negative stuff for a game that I like so much. So I don't want to like dwell on this too much. And some of these are a little spoilery, so I don't want to like get too much into it. But one of my biggest complaints, I think, is that like, so Dan, we were talking about the dungeon design, and like, even though the dungeons being deliberate is a good change for Persona, they still sort of look randomly generated,
Okay.
So it's like I think it's important to draw a division between like conceptually, thematically, the dungeons are cool, but when it comes to the actual act of like, this is me walking around the dungeon, it's a lot of like kind of boxy corridors and not a lot of like environmental flair to really make them stand out. Not a lot of like dimension. It does have parts where it's like, oh, you can jump up on something and there might be 2 levels or some stairs that you're going up or something, but it's not like, compared to any other sort of RPG where it's like you're in a cave and there are, there's like volume to it. And it just doesn't necessarily have that punch to the dungeon design.
Okay.
So even though it's an evolution for Persona, it still doesn't feel like that particular aspect of it is sort of like up to, genre par.
Okay. And that's the biggest downside.
I think that for me, that was one of the biggest ones. I think it's hard for me to decide between that and so like I really like Persona 4 also.
Yeah.
And my other big complaint about it is like there are times when it feels like the development team was like, wow, people really liked this part of Persona 4. That really worked well. And instead of saying like, let's take some cues from what people liked about that and craft something new, it feels like they just sort of said, let's take that thing and put it here.
But if we're new to the series, it's just going to be
If
wall
you're
to wall amazing.
if you're new to the series, that won't bother you at all.
Yeah.
But I mean, for people who have played Persona 3, 4, I think you will see some things that are familiar in a way that, for me, it was just sort of like, oh, I kind of wish they would have done something different with that, because that just feels like taking a concept that I've seen already. Well, not recently, but in the last official game, and it's just sort of resurfacing here.
So I'm trying to get a sense of like, if you're a fan of RPGs, fan of JRPGs in particular,
Mm-hmm.
jump onto this game like it's the last lifeboat
Oh,
off the
Absolutely
Titanic.
cannot be missed.
But
Yeah.
I feel like, is there anything you need to brace people for? Like a lot of reading. Any other thing that is going to really strike them if they're coming in fresh?
I mean, not if you are a fan of Japanese RPGs.
Okay.
Like if that is a genre that you play and enjoy, I think you are familiar with maybe the sort of slow build up to full functionality that the game has. I will say too, I think the pacing, one of the things that Persona 4 took a hit for is like the pacing of that game. Those first few hours were rough, where like they didn't give you a lot to do. And at least in this game, even though you don't have full freedom, you still have, like, the pacing in that first part is better, gives you more to do, sets up the story better, I think, and keeps you more invested early on. So it's not like Dan was, we said earlier, it's not just a big tutorial.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I only referred to it as that because, like, it does. You don't have the freedom that you'd get later on.
right.
Are we going to be debating this versus Zelda for Game of the Year this year? Like, is it that caliber?
It's so early in the year, right? I don't even know what
Make
other
that call,
contenders are
Dan.
coming up.
Make that call.
Yeah, I'll probably bring it up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
I
haven't
mean-
played one. You've only put 30 hours in the other. Make the call right
know,
now.
I mean,
Red
with the
wire, blue
score, when you're dealing with, a game that, I mean, the score is just my opinion.
Totally.
But, I mean, like, Dan's enjoying it. I know Kim's playing it and she's enjoying it. I think when you're dealing with a game that is like that good, it's definitely in the discussions.
Yeah.
Whether or not is this game one of the 2 finalists or something, I mean, who knows? But I mean, this game will come up in Game of the Year discussions.
We just need to make time for it.
Yeah, and that's and that's a trick with it too. I mean, like you said, so it took me about 100 hours to get through it.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. Like, there are so many games I feel like that they don't rush, but they don't necessarily give the stories and give their characters the time they need to breathe. And that's one of the things, there's sort of a confidence about Persona 5 that's just like you're in this is what you're getting, and we're going to do this the way we want to do it. And they do it right, and it is satisfying. And like by the end of that game, like your questions are answered, you feel closer to the characters, and you like have a real sense of journey, a real sense of like looking back and being like, wow, that was a ride.
It's a rare treat in the game industry to have a game that feels 100 hours and justified.
Yeah.
But this game pulls it off.
It really does. And the other thing that's interesting about it is like, this isn't like, I'd say take a game like Skyrim, which I also put about 100 hours into. But that was one where it's like you finish the main story in Skyrim in 15 hours, and then you go do all the guilds, and you go to like all there's sort of a contrast between like core story and sort of side story. And Persona is pretty much just like all story straight through. Like Persona is not a series that's all about like side quests and fetch quests and stuff and stuff for people. I mean, like, the structure is such that you are just choosing what to do with your time, and you're going to want to fill that time, which means that it's just going to take a while.
Worth the wait overall.
Oh yeah.
And just the real hit here is that we'll have to wait another 8 years for Persona 6.
You still have 70 hours to go, Dan.
They're going to fly by.
Thank you so much for watching this excerpt from the Game Informer Show podcast. You can click right here if you want to subscribe and listen to the audio version of the full show. Full episodes air every Thursday, and they feature Game Informer editors sitting around talking about the biggest reviews, previews. We talk about exclusive impressions of Game Informer's cover stories. We have long-form developer interviews, everything that's great in gaming. So every Thursday, be sure to check it out.